Good morning to those of you in Hong Kong and good evening to those in the United States. Welcome to today's seminar entitled Toward Longevity-Ready Cities, Built Social Environmental Determinants of Healthy Longevity. My name is Greg Margolis, and I am the Director of the Fellowship Office in the U.S. National Academy of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and it is my pleasure to serve as the Master of Ceremonies for today's session. This session is part of the NAM-HKU Fellowship in Global Health Leadership, which is a wonderful collaboration between the Hong Kong University and the National Academy of Medicine. We are so proud of this program and partnerships as part of our commitment to the global impact of our work. We believe strongly that the quality of our work benefits enormously from an international perspective. And programs such as this and partnerships with organizations such as the Hong Kong University are a very important part of our mission, our vision, and our core values. It is now my privilege to introduce the President of the National Academy of Medicine, Dr. Victor Zhao.
Thank you, Greg, and thank all of you for joining us today. My name is Victor Zhao Chinmoy, and I'm the president of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, and of course, a very proud Hong Kongese. I'm so honored to be here to open the first ever NAM Hong Kong U International Fellowship in Global Health Leadership Seminar. This is co-hosted by Hong Kong University and the National Academy of Medicine. And we're very privileged to be collaborating with Hong Kong U on this really pioneering effort. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Vivian Lee, who's the Executive Associate Dean of Faculty of Medicine here in Hong Kong, and the Interim Director of the School of Public Health for hosting this program altogether. So I'd like to particularly give my special thanks and gratitude to Mr. Patrick Poon. He is, in fact, the generous donor and of this program. So we thank you, Patrick, for your generous support in sponsoring the fellowship and this program. Professor C.S. Lau, the Dean of Medicine of the Li Kai-shing Faculty of Medicine. I gather he's seeing patients, but also attending this at the same time. I don't know how he does it, but we certainly appreciate the fact that he's joining our program today. And I look forward to strengthening our relationship with Hong Kong U. So there's a number of other people I'd like to recognize, but one for such who I believe is in the audience is Sophia Chang. She's professor in nursing and senior advisor to the President's Office, Hong Kong U. The reason I mention Sophia is because when she was Secretary for Food and Health for Hong Kong government, she and I had this idea of creating a fellowship between NAM and Hong Kong. So it's really nice to see how it's realized through Hong Kong University and the generous donation of Mr. Patrick Poon. And I understand that Keiichi Fukuda is also registered. I hope he's online because I do want to thank him, who is the former director of School of Public Health in Hong Kong University, and he's really the person who helped us realize this, as is, of course, Dr. Gabriel Leung. So with that background, I'd like to say a word about, first of all, who we are. For those who are not familiar with National Academy of Medicine and what we do, we, in fact, were founded in our parent organization, the National Academy of Sciences, in 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln and Congress as a nonprofit entity to advise the U.S. government at the time of Civil War on issues of science and of course, and related issues. And of course, when health and medicine became such an important issue, our Institute of Medicine, or IOM, was founded in 1970, which has now changed its name to National Academy of Medicine in 2015. And that's our history. Over the years, we have been advising U.S. government, but also broadly, of course, became globalized and worked with many experts across the globe and partnered with organizations worldwide to address issues that affect all of us. So as a result, our mission is now to improve health for all over the globe, not just domestically, and remain strongly committed to building leadership capacity to advance health and health equity. Now, this international fellowship, a natural extension of course, our mission, recognizing the need to build a pipeline of health policy scholars who train in bridging science with policy to put forth informed solutions to some of the world's most critical health challenges. We established this fellowship with Dr. Gabriel Leung, and of course, with the support of Patrick Poon. This was done in 2018. Now, the fellowship has been running for 3 years, with one fellow selected each year from 2019 to 2021. Through this program, we help train the next generation of global health leaders to develop evidence-based medicine and policies that will foster better health in their own home countries. But equally important, these fellows will also, excuse me, sorry. But equally important, these fellows will also shape a global network of expertise that would undoubtedly strengthen international efforts, collaboration to improve health outcomes, as well as response to global threats that affect us all. Our past experience with global partnership demonstrate how enriching they are in terms of new knowledge, novel insights, perspectives, deep bonds and connections, and perhaps most importantly, a strong understanding of the common problems we all face in the world in health and healthcare. So I'd like to say how pleased we are to have Professor Chinmoy Sarkar as our inaugural NAM-HKU Fellow in Global Health Leadership. Chinmoy has been a wonderful asset to the NAM, and I'm sure he is to the HKU. He's been a valued colleague and a teammate. During his fellowship, Professor Sarkar was able to make significant contributions to our work, especially around social determinants of health and the impact on healthy longevity. His contribution was particularly impactful for the development and writing of the recent report, which is widely read and launched in Singapore, in DC, in the Middle East, and elsewhere, called the NAM Healthy Longevity Roadmap Report. And in fact, he's been so patient in enduring the ups and downs of the pandemic. And I was so pleased to meet with him in person last fall. I was impressed with his intelligence, knowledge, and commitment to global health and public health. And so I look forward to his continued engagement with us and A&M connecting to Hong Kong U. So thank you very much for allowing me to say these words. And so now please join me in welcoming Professor Vivian Ling, whom I already introduced. She'll say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. And on behalf of the School of Public Health here at Hong Kong U Faculty of Medicine, could I also welcome everyone in Hong Kong, in the US, and anywhere else in the world and joining us in this seminar. I also like to start by thanking Victor for the partnership, which is very, very important to us. And of course, to Dr. Patrick Poon for the donation, which made this fellowship possible. And I'd like to further acknowledge Keiji Fukuda, the past director, and also the mentor for Chinmoy on his project, for all his contributions, and to C.S. Lau, our dean, for trying to double task and join the seminar this morning in his very, very busy schedule. For those of you who are not so familiar with Hong Kong U, a few brief words. I think internationalism has always been important, and that's a starting point for us. Hong Kong is very much at the crossroad of the East and West and has been so for nearly 2 centuries. And Hong Kong U has mostly recently been ranked #1 university in terms of internationalism. And Hong Kong U Medicine is the oldest in Asia, so long-standing presence. I'm very happy to have been ranked #13 globally of all medical schools. And that partly reflects the fact that our School of Public Health has made such an enormous contribution to the field of emerging infectious diseases, starting with SARS and being now the #1 center for coronavirus research. And our issues, of course, are not limited to COVID or coronavirus, though that has preoccupied, I think, all of us over the last few years. But we have had the opportunity of following a number of cohorts in Hong Kong as we watch this very dynamic city grow, change, further urbanize, have its economics ups and downs, be in the middle of geopolitics, and try to negotiate, as we all do, that relationship between human beings and our ecosystem. Our MPH is a flagship program with 180 students enrolled this current year, and we have a newest flagship in our Bachelor of Arts and Science in Global Health and Development. And I might say a baby for our previous director of School of Public Health. And of course, the NAM-HKU Fellowship contributes to this strategic direction in terms of our contribution to global health. And it offers the opportunity for mid-career scholars and professionals to make a contribution to the health of public through global learning, and of course, helps us strengthen our relationship and partnership with NAM. So today we have an opportunity to hear from our inaugural fellow on his project. And I do want to know the importance of his topic about longevity-ready cities, because Hong Kong is known not only as the most densely populated city, but also has the longest life expectancy in the world. So this topic is hugely important for Hong Kong. It is also incredibly important for East Asia with its very rapidly aging rate. And of course, globally, we now see more than 50% of the world is urban. So I think what we're about to hear is really so central to the present and the future of global health. So we look forward to Chinmoy's continued contribution to global health as an outcome of this fellowship. And I'd like to thank again Dr. Patrick Poon for the generous support, and to Dr. Victor Tsao for the collaboration with Hong Kong U. Thank you very much. So back over to you, Greg.
Thank you for those wonderful remarks. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Chinmoy Sarkar, the inaugural NAM-HKU Fellow in Global Health Leadership. He is an associate professor in the Department of Urban Planning and Design, Faculty of Architecture at Hong Kong University, where he co-leads the Healthy High Density Cities Lab and HKU Urban Lab. He's an honorary member of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Oxford, and his research expertise and interests lie at the interdisciplinary fields of healthy places and cities. And during his fellowship, Dr. Sarkar contributed significantly to the NAM Global Roadmap for Healthy Longevity, an evidence-based report with recommendations for societies worldwide to foster healthy longevity through strategies related to the social, behavioral enablers of health, healthcare and public health systems, and science and technology. Dr. Sarkar's expertise was instrumental in how the report came together and how it seeks to understand how the physical environment, specifically housing, the built environment, pollution effects, transportation, climate change, and natural disasters all influence healthy aging. Dr. Sarkar was also authored a manuscript entitled Built and Social Determinants of Healthy Longevity with his NAM collaborators, with the aim of studying the social and environmental determinants of healthy longevity. On a personal note, it has been a pleasure to host Chinmoy on his trips to Washington, D.C. I'd like to thank him for his contributions to this important work and for being a wonderful inaugural fellow. It's always challenging being first at something, and he was a great fellow and a great colleague. In particular, we thank him and HKU for flexibility during the travel restrictions imposed by COVID. Quite frankly, the fellowship experience didn't pan out exactly the way we had thought, but we're immeasurably grateful for the flexibility. And we're proud that we were able to meet the objectives of the fellowship despite the challenges of the past few years. So with that, it is a pleasure to introduce Chinmoy and his presentation. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Margolis and Dr. Zhao for the very kind introduction. And I am indeed very thankful to the National Academy of Medicine and the School of Public Health at Hong Kong U to have the honor of the NAM-HKU Fellowship in Global Health Leadership. Good evening, Dr. Zhao. Good morning, Dean Lau, Professor Lin, Professor Fukuda, Dr. Pun, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and friends, depending on the time zones, of course. The title of today's NAM-HKU Fellowship is Towards Longevity Ready Cities, Built and Social Determinants of Healthy Longevity. At the onset, I wish to say that I'm speaking on my own as an individual and not as an official representative of the National Academy of Medicine, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, or the study committee. The views expressed here are those of my own and not necessarily of NAM, the National Academies, or the study committee. There has been an ongoing demographic shift with increasing proportion of elderly. In fact, the older adult population is expected to outnumber the young by 2030. Aging is characterized by deficits in intrinsic capacity, especially the functional capacity and the cognitive capacity, and increasing frequency and intensities of disease endpoints. And these pose enormous burden on our healthcare system and economy. Mitigating and adapting to such a global demographic shift will entail both a systematic changes as well as deliberative actions, not only in basic and translational sciences, and clinical medicine, as well as healthcare, but also non-pharmacological sectors such as social, economic, environmental, and personal determinants of health and healthy lifestyle. The National Academies of Medicine assembled an international commission of experts, co-chaired by Professor Linda Fried from Columbia University and Professor John Wong from the National University of Singapore, to produce an authoritative evidence-based report, which is called the NAM's Global Roadmap for Healthy Longevity. During the period of my fellowship, I had the opportunity and the privilege to contribute to the physical environmental enablers of healthy longevity. Globally, the life expectancy at birth and at 65 has consistently increased over the years. So has the healthy life expectancy. Nonetheless, there exists a gap of 9.6 years between the healthy lifespan and the lifespan. This constitutes a significant proportion of our life spent in disability, with enormous healthcare, social, economic burdens in our societies. According to the NAM Commission, in healthy longevity, years of good health approach the biological lifespan, with physical, cognitive, and social functioning that enables well-being. According to the NAM's Commission's vision, healthy longevity triggers a virtuous cycle wherein it both benefits from and enables a lifetime with meaning, social engagement, learning, and growth. Health and productive engagement builds capital, human, financial, and social capital, and increased capital in turn fuels a system that supports the so-called enablers, healthcare, social needs, physical environment, as well as through work. And these systems in turn collectively support health and productive engagement. The major disruptors in this virtuous cycle may include ageism, disease, poverty, pollution, and inequity. In my presentation today, I shall be focusing on the physical environment enablers, especially the built environment and its interactions with the social environment. A life course approach to healthy longevity is, in essence, preventive. It is important to understand that our functional capacities evolve over the life course, increasing right from the prenatal stage up to early adulthood, and thereafter begins to depreciate. The rate of depreciation increases with aging. Crucially, the rate of decrease in our functional capacities also depends on the type of physical environment we are exposed to and how we react to such environments. In other words, health disparities amongst individuals emerge over the life's course as a result of accumulated effects of environmental exposures, as indicated by the length of the black arrows in this diagram. Built environment in our cities comprises housing, public spaces, transport infrastructures, facilities, and destinations. These are the attributes of the built environment not only influences our lifestyles, behavior, social interaction, but also affect the degree of our exposures to health inhibiting factors such as environmental pollutants, disparity, which all influence health. In this presentation, I shall touch upon some of the evidence base linking various attributes of built environment, including housing, public spaces, destinations and services, transport, pollution, and climate change related factors to health. Housing. Multi-level housing factors, including at the indoor housing level, the buildings level, and the neighborhood level, constitute key social determinants of health. At the indoor level, adequate living space have been evidenced to protect against allostatic load, hypertension, depression, as well as respiratory diseases. At the buildings level, residing in housing with suboptimal conditions is detrimental to health. Long-term US studies have shown that old buildings characterized by lead-based paints have higher levels of blood lead levels, including higher risks of osteoporosis, frailty, cardiovascular, and neurodegenerative diseases in later life. Higher building block density in Hong Kong have been found to be associated with elevated risks of housing density, elevated risks of depression and hypertension, whereas in Singapore, it has been associated with higher COVID transmissions, especially in the low SES areas. Nationwide Swiss study has shown that living on the ground floor relative to living on the 8th floor or above was associated with higher risks of mortality from cardiovascular diseases, stroke, and respiratory diseases, whereas it was associated with lower risks of suicides. In low middle income country settings, housing disadvantage and housing with poor physical conditions have been consistently associated with respiratory diseases and malarial infections. Whereas living in housing provisioned with basic services can improve overall well-being. At a neighborhood level, higher residential density often acts as a proxy for compactness and co-location of health-promoting services, and have been associated with active travel, physical activity, and lower risks of obesity and hypertension. Age integration will enable healthy longevity, whereas age segregation will be detrimental. Intergenerational and multi-generational living can not only solve the issues of affordable housing for the younger generation, but also cater to the needs of social support and care for the older generation. It has been shown to be associated with improved sense of community, quality of life, and psychosocial health amongst the elderly. In Asian sociocultural context, multi-generational living is often associated with family bondage and filial piety and have been found to be beneficial in old age. Housing modification interventions for assistive living in the form of doorway widening, provisioning of automatic doors, ramps, handrails, grab rails, etc., can reduce falls, injuries, and mortality in old age. Aging in place have also been found to help maintain social connections, sense of place attachment, and support networks, promoting overall well-being. Well-designed public spaces, such as parks and streets with good sidewalks, can promote physical activity, social interaction, and sense of community. Street-level physical configuration in the form of simpler street layouts with lower topological costs and higher accessibility have been found to increase mobility, walking, as well as protect against obesity, psychological distress, loneliness, and cognitive impairments. Walkability represents the attributes of the built, social, and natural environment in our cities that promote walking and have been found to be associated with lower risks of obesity, mental disorders, hypertension, cardiovascular, and all non-accidental cause mortality. Exposure to green spaces have also been evidenced to be beneficially associated with health across the life course, including fetal health and adolescent educational attainment, adult health in terms of improved physical and mental health, and in older age in terms of lower odds of mortality and dementia. In terms of design, assistive barrier-free design of public spaces can enhance usage, promoting active living in older age. Co-location of health-specific destinations and services enhances accessibility to them. I must stress that some of these destinations can also be health-inhibiting destinations, such as fast food outlets. Accessibility to physically active activities, facilities, and community services have been shown to promote physical activity, improve mental health, and reduce the risks of dementia. Accessibility to healthcare facilities enhances health-seeking behavior and have been associated with lower risks of chronic disease and premature mortality. The Million Death Study in India found that the participants residing 50 kilometers and beyond a well-resourced hospital has higher risks, significantly higher risks of mortality relative to those residing within. Neighborhoods with higher density of healthy food options, such as supermarkets and grocery stores selling fresh fruits and vegetables, have been shown to protect against unhealthy weight outcomes, whereas accessibility to fast food outlets selling high calorific food have been found to be associated with higher risks of obesity. Interventions in the form of improving access to healthy food options in the neighborhood, such as the introduction of a new supermarket, can also promote healthy dietary behaviors. Public transport has been associated with active travel. Access to public transport in the vicinity of home and workplaces not only promotes active travel and physical activity, because people make trips from and 2, homes, workplaces, and transit stops. Now, transport interventions, such as the introduction of bus rapid transport, have been found to increase walking for transport and recreation. Another important factor is the design. So research has evidenced that inclusive and assistive design of transit stops and interchange hubs can also promote public transport usage. In high-income countries, ability to drive is synonymous with the multiplicity of available life choices and independence. Driving cessation in elderly has been associated with higher dependence, life space restrictions, and mortality. Pollution. Ambient air pollution generated from transport, industries, fossil fuel burning, etc., have been known to produce oxidative stress, airways inflammation, chronic brain inflammation, and neurodegeneration. They have been associated with higher risks of respiratory diseases like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, as well as cardiovascular diseases and all-cause mortality. A China-wide study has shown that the cumulative detrimental association between air pollution and cognitive performance was much more pronounced in the older adults relative to the young and among the males. In low middle income countries, respiratory health accounts for 50% of death and disability associated with indoor air pollution from cooking. In noise pollution, occupational noise can cause hearing loss, and hearing loss is a risk factor for dementia. Noise pollution from transport and construction has also been found to be associated with higher risks of mental disorders, Alzheimer's disease, and CVD mortality. In low and middle income countries, lack of access to drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene have been found to be associated with higher risks of diarrheal diseases and premature mortality. Climate-induced temperature extremes have been consistently associated with higher risks of mortality as well as mental health disorders. The impact of climate change will be more pronounced in high-density, packed, built-up areas and cities like Hong Kong because of the heat island effect. With studies in Hong Kong showing a more pronounced risk among the elderly aged 75 years and above. Consistently, US-wide evidence suggests that heat extremes are associated with elevated risks of COPD, diabetes, myocardial infarction, and congestive heart failure, with the effect being more pronounced among the elderly population subgroups. Climate change may also affect the spatiotemporal distribution of transmission of infectious diseases. Climate also impacts agricultural productivity and food security, indirectly being associated with malnutrition and higher rates of suicides, especially amongst the farmers. Natural disasters not only pose direct loss of life, but also have long-term health consequences. For example, the increased rates of obesity, depression, and cognitive decline experienced after the Great Eastern Japanese earthquake and tsunami, or the higher rates of symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder after Hurricane Katrina, and we would experience similar pattern after the Turkish earthquake. Now, the built environment and the social environment, as well as related existing policies, often interact to produce socio-spatial disparities in access to healthy built environment. Evidences suggest that there has been inequitable distribution of physical activity-related resources, with low SES and minority neighborhoods having lesser access and with higher odds of sedentary lifestyles in the US. Research has also shown that there is clustering of calorie-dense fast food outlets in low SES neighborhoods with higher risks of obesity. There is also evidence of socioeconomic and racial disparity in terms of access to salutogenic environments such as parks, thereby influencing levels of physical activity of the residents. In low and middle income countries, children and women have relatively higher exposure to indoor air pollution with detrimental effects on respiratory health. Now, then the question is, who will be the big three by 2050? Now, we must acknowledge that different countries are at different stages of urbanization and associated socio-demographic and health transitions. The big three in terms of the total population of older adults aged 65 and above will include: number one, China, which will be 80% urbanized by 2050, and with 395 million residents aged 65 and above will constitute the country with the largest elderly population with a dependency ratio of 55. India is estimated to be 53% urbanized by 2050, and with 250 million aged 65 plus will be second with a dependency ratio of 24.7. The United States of America will be the third largest population with 88.7 million residents ages 65 and above and a dependency ratio of 42.7. Now, according to the Global Burden of Disease study published last year, the estimated cases of dementia prevalence is expected to almost triple from 57.4 million to 152.8 million cases in 2050. Now, if we see the breakdown by the strata of socio-demographic index, the increments in low, middle, and middle SDI countries from the 2019 estimates will be 330%, 239%, and 242% respectively, much higher relative to the high SDI countries. So how prepared are the cities of these countries to deal with such an exponential increase in dementia cases in terms of dementia-friendly design, for example? Now, if we look at Hong Kong SAR, the trajectory of a population increase of elderly aged 65 and above is much higher compared to the global average. The population of residents aged 65 and above is likely to double from 1.47 million to 2.83 million by 2050. Similarly, Hong Kong SAR will be among the top 10 in terms of the highest dependency ratio for residents aged 65 and above. Dependency ratio is a ratio of the residents aged 65 and above to those aged 24 to 65. And it is estimated to increase from 30.3 in 2021 to 83.2 by 2050, which is almost 2 and 3 times larger as compared to the global increase from 16.9 in 2021 to 29.5 in 2050. Now, I would like to briefly talk about the Pilot Health District project as an exemplar in healthy longevity and longevity-ready city initiative. And now a town-based pilot scheme has been proposed in Singapore, essentially collaborative in nature, jointly led by the government agency, the Housing and Development Board, the healthcare provider, which is the National University Health System and Academia, which is the National University of Singapore. A new district in Queenstown will be developed, wherein 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be 65 and above. It has been envisioned that residents' access to preventive health services will be improved by directly sending care coordinators on site to meet the residents. Smart apps will be developed to enable patients to view their health records anytime and anywhere. Targeted programs will be designed to encourage purposeful enhancement in late life. And built environment designs will be improved through retrofitting, such as construction of attractively designed staircases, well-designed heritage walks, co-locating healthcare services, as well as designing environments that promote opportunities for all ages, especially interaction and bondage between people from all ages. Now, in conclusion, I summarize some of the key points for longevity-ready cities, aiming to reduce the gap between the healthy lifespan and the lifespan. There is indeed a need for multi-pronged mitigation and adaptation strategies to be put in place in cities to deal with the twin challenges posed by our increasing lifespans and urbanization. This will involve urban optimizations in planning and design to create cities and neighborhoods that are, in a sense, compact, assistive, adaptable, socially inclusive, and has an inherent ability to promote and sustain smart living. Firstly, compact cities consume lesser energies and have lower environmental externalities, and thus optimize on ecological performance. They are characterized by high density, mixed land use, and significant reliance on public transport. They can hence be walkable, green, and less polluted, with inherent benefits to human health. Secondly, assistive universal design of built environments can enhance the person-environment fit. Enhanced person-environment fit can compensate for, to some extent, for the age-induced deficits in intrinsic capacity. Interventions such as home modifications, retrofitting of public spaces, and redesigning of public transit, as well as stations and hubs, can create more assistive environments. Thirdly, societies will be prone to shocks in the form of climate hazards, natural disasters, pandemics, and global conflicts. And the impacts of these shocks are likely to be more pronounced in the older population subgroup. Adaptive design, such as low carbon, climate resistant design, balanced land use planning, and as well as the use of disaster tolerant materials in low and middle income countries can increase shock tolerance, enhancing underlying population level resilience and health. Fourthly, built environments should be designed so as to eliminate any social inequities and resulting disparities in health. And lastly, we should also focus on leveraging on existing innovations such as information and technology, social innovations, innovations in design, robotics, etc., to improve the quality of life and health of the elderly population subgroup. These are the references I used for this presentation. Some of the memorable snaps from my visit to NAM, meeting with Professor Dr. Victor Zhao, and in the end, I wish to acknowledge a few members, I am extremely grateful to Dr. Patrick Poon for his vision and for supporting the NAM Fellowship. At the National Academy of Medicine, I am indeed very thankful to President Dr. Zhao for his valued support and guidance. Also, thank Maureen Henry, Emma, and Samantha. At the Fellowship Office, I am very thankful to Dr. Greg Margolis and Yumi Phillips for their constant support. Yumi and for her patience and always being there to support when needed. I also take the opportunity to thank my NAM mentors from the Global Roadmap for Healthy Longevity, especially Professor Linda Fried, Professor John Wong, and Professor Jack Rowe. I'm always thankful to them for their valued and insightful advice. Within the University of Hong Kong, I wish to thank the Dean of Medicine, Professor Lau, the previous Dean, Professor Gabriel Leong, for their support. And especially I had the privilege to be a student and taking classes from Gabriel Leong, which is also very good and a learning experience for me. At the School of Public Health, I used to thank Professor Keiji Fukuda for his mentorship and for his time. I also wish to thank Professor Vivian Lin and Ms. Yankee Wong for her support. Within my faculty, I wish to thank our Dean, Professor Chris Webster, for his continued and valued support and encouragement throughout my fellowship. Within my Department of Urban Planning and Design, I wish to thank our head, Professor Senjing He, for her support. I also wish to thank Dr. Kayan Lai for working with me in several exciting projects, including in healthy longevity. I also wish to thank today's panelists, Professor Jack Rowe, Professor Chris Webster, and Mr. Paul Irving for their crucial and very valuable time. Last but not the least, I wish to thank all colleagues, researchers with whom I had the privilege of working and for supporting me so kindly during my fellowship. Thank you.
Chinmoy, that was a spectacular presentation, and thank you very much for such a wonderful overview of your important work at the National Academy of Medicine. And once again, thank you for your invaluable contribution to that important project. It is now my pleasure to briefly introduce our very distinguished panel to react to Chinmoy's presentation. We are truly honored to have an amazing collection of subject matter experts, and I'm sure we will have quite a robust conversation. For the sake of time, my introductions will be very brief, but I do encourage you to read their full bios on the event website. Moderating today's conversation will be Jack Rowe, who is the Julius B. Richmond Professor of Health Policy and Aging at Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. We also are pleased to be joined by Professor Chris Webster, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Chair, Professor of Urban Planning and Development Economics at HKU, and Paul Irving, a distinguished scholar in residence at the University of Southern California Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, and a senior advisor at the Milken Institute. Jack and Paul both served on the International Commission for the NAM Global Roadmap for Healthy Longevity. And with that, Jack, I'd like to turn it over to you to moderate our reaction and the question and answer phase of today's session.
Thanks
Jack?
very much, Greg. Can I be heard? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, very good. We've had some technical issues on my side, so I apologize for the background here, which is a lamp on the ceiling of my office. instead of Hong Kong University, because that device is not cooperating. But I'm thrilled to participate in this. Let me start very briefly by acknowledging that the Healthy Longevity Initiative at the National Academy of Medicine, where I'm proud to be a member, is the brainchild of Victor Zhao. Victor has led this effort with vision and energetic leadership and intense persuasiveness. And he has made this happen, and he's generated the ideas, the resources. He's guided us through the pandemic. The commission was, I think, very successful, continues to have a significant impact, which it will going forward. So we're very grateful to have him and for his intense effort. I've been a member, as Victor knows, of the National Academy in one form or another for a long time. I've been waiting for this to happen for a long time, and along comes Victor and ignites this enthusiasm around healthy longevity. So thank you. I want to also thank Chinmoy, who's a deeply respected scholar in the field and a great collaborator and colleague to work with. And I see this fellowship as a really terrific adjunct to the commission report. It supplements it, it brings it to a different level with respect to some aspects of it. And I think it's very, very helpful. And I congratulate Chinmoy on his work. I'm going to make 4 very, very brief comments and then turn it over first to Chris and then to Paul for their reactions and additional thoughts. And then we'll have some time to respond to questions. Greg, I am now on a cell phone doing this, so I'm going to have to rely on you for advice in terms of when we should stop talking and what questions there may be, as my technology may not be reliable. The first point I want to make is that this work is in the context of thinking about the built environment. And I'm not an architect, okay? I'm just a geriatrician, but so Chris can talk to us about what this means. But from a naive point of view, as a guy, as a geriatrician, this is about conceptualizing the built environment as longevity friendly, not age friendly. Age friendly is the big buzz. And it's sort of like helping the elderly to the disadvantage or exclusion of other generations. We're talking about, Chinmoy is focusing on longevity friendly. That's number one. Number two, Chinmoy has taken, as the field has generally pivoted to, a life course perspective. He's talking about all generations. And that means there's increased intergenerational relationships in these built environments, as we are seeing in the Singapore Health District project that he mentioned, which is an ambitious and marvelous effort led by John Wong. So life course is important. Number 3 is that the concept of compression of morbidity is driving much of this, and that is that the proportion of life expectancy that has been experienced under disability has progressively reduced over time, and people are living healthier longer. But that is not the case for everybody. It's not the case for the less advantaged populations. We're actually seeing decompression of morbidity, if you will, in the socioeconomic lower portion of the population. And so the built environment has to accommodate that. It has to have that in the design to try to assure that those less advantaged populations are treated effectively. And the last, and I think a very obvious but worth underlying observation from Chinmoy's excellent presentation is that we need a multidimensional strategy here. We need to think about housing and transport and healthcare and employment and volunteering. And And so there's no single solution here. This is a multi-dimensional strategy. And that means we need to bring together a multidisciplinary group of colleagues to work on this. And they need to understand each other's nomenclature and taxonomy and evaluation and methodological strategies. So those are just 4 kind of early upfront comments that I would make. I want to turn it to Chris. And that's Chris, I'd like to start with, I saw an article today about the 15-minute city. And Chinmoy commented on the compact design. You are an expert in this area, and how does that relate to longevity friendly, and how do you consider this concept going forward?
Yeah, nice question. Thank you very much, John. The 15-minute city. Funnily enough, I was doodling on some paper on my desk yesterday on the 15-minute city when discussing with a colleague visiting from New Zealand, actually. That question raises, I won't answer the question in detail, only to say, if you could make cities such that people, by and large, obtain their local services within 15 minutes, my own view is that the city would be probably not very exciting. The Maoist city before 1979, it was a 15-minute city. Everybody worked in their work units and drank the same coffee and went to the same sort of educational establishment. And they didn't have to go beyond 15 minutes because the coffee was just as bad in the next work unit. So basically, the modern city, people travel because of the opportunities that the city presents. The city is a kind of a unit as a whole. That's something I want to come on to in a second or two. The city we might want to think about as a human colony. And I think one of the really exciting agenda items for longevity studies is how do human colonies, how do these natural clusters of human beings, our own species, perform in terms of the socially produced longevity, and how does that change in different types of cities and different sizes of cities? But before just tackling that briefly, I want to make 2 points, if I may. The first is that some of the studies that Chinmoy cited relate to findings that demonstrate association or a cause between built environment inputs and longevity outputs, where the inputs are actually planned. They're planned and managed. Now, he had that slide on Singapore, classic example. The building scale, the neighborhood scale, urban health, public health management programs. Some of them related to planned and managed interventions, if you like. Actually, if you look carefully, many of them did not. Many of them relate to general configuration of cities, the human colony, that are not particularly managed. In fact, they're famously chaotic or complex rather, and unmanageable. So the first thing I think the community needs to appreciate in taking this forward is we can influence some things and we can not influence some things. What things can we influence? So the next run through, if you like, Chinmoy's list of studies might pick out those that focus on influenceable interventions. That's the first point. Second point, once we've selected those out, there are different scales, different spatial scales and temporal, actually. But the building, street, and neighborhood scale is clearly very important. It's the most tangible thing. people can really understand the idea of dementia-friendly housing estates, for example. This is very, very important. The architectural scale, pandemic resilient designs of buildings, for example, that better optimize against airborne and human vectors in infectious disease. So the building neighborhood scale is one. The second is the city scale. For example, lower density cities might produce greater pandemic resilience. Discuss. There are studies emerging, and there are some studies out there. More green space. There are multiple benefits right across the life course from green space that seem to promote aggregate health, if you like, at the city scale, the whole city scale. But the last point I want to make, to come back to the one I started with, is probably a little bit new to most people listening in or watching this. And I think it has really, really high potential value for longevity studies. It's the city system scale. The cities within a country. If you look at cities within a country, they tend to perform as an integrated social network of human agents, if you like, and their performance, their performativity is very regular in respect to the whole system. So social products generated from interacting human beings, social products like GDP, inventions, sexually transmitted diseases, they tend to scale with city size at a regular factor of about 15% above pro rata. So as a city population doubles, GDP or wages will not only double, it go up by 115%. Same with sexually transmitted diseases. On the other hand, infrastructure costs of cities, including social infrastructure, tend to scale sublinearly, sub-pro rata, fascinatingly, by the same 15%. So the amount of roads you need, when a city doubles in population, the amount of roads you need doesn't go up by 100%, it goes up by 85%. So where does longevity sit in this fascinating, if you like, performance of how whole cities work together? Animal energy scales at an efficiency saving of 25%. As animals increase in mass and size by 100%, and animal species, their metabolic rate only increases by 75%. For cities, the energy efficiency scaling is, as I say, 85%. It's very regular. So what about longevity? Is longevity a socially produced phenomena via multiple channels? There's really not been the studies done yet to explore that. I just finished with one recent example of that. In a recent meta-analysis of this issue of scaling and health, I think it was in Nature Medicine, Chinmoy, you might know. I think it was South American cities found that cities do not scale with longevity measured by life expectancy from birth very powerfully. But if you look at cities that are fragmented, that means cities that have lots of green patches. They're not compact. So here's a counter hypothesis. Cities that are not compact, they're fragmented, tend to scale very powerfully in longevity, in life expectancy with city size. Now, having read that, I'm planning all sorts of investigations in looking at these systems effects that are very robust. enable us to say, what might it be about cities, the human colony, that we can adapt, that is demonstrably linked to longevity at a whole system level, because these are natural laws. And if we can sort of tap into that, then we're onto something. I've said too much.
I think, Chris, the results of those studies will be a very anticipated supplement to this work. Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting and thoughtful perspective. I'm going to ask you one more very quick question. I want to get to Paul, but one of the concepts in Chinmoy's analysis was the idea of embedding different kind, and this has to do with a compact city, I guess, but embedding different kinds of services, co-locating them, and particularly co-locating healthcare services with residential services, which I think in the United States at least has been shown to reduce hospitalization, emergency room visits, et cetera, and increasing access to care for people who might otherwise forego care because they had to get on transport in order to get to a doctor and they weren't feeling well. Do you have any general thoughts about this as a theme or an important component going forward of the built environment?
Well, absolutely. The evidence shows that co-location is very important for multiple factors. One is in a mixed services, residential and other neighborhood district, you get quicker care. This for a while, this was one hypothesis for explaining Hong Kong's longevity. Number one point, you have a heart attack, you get found quicker. You have a heart attack, you're in the hospital, you're in emergency unit of the hospital more quickly. Actually, Gabriel Leung discovered that it wasn't that. It was successful, I think, anti-smoking legislation. So
yeah,
key component. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure this helps. So that's one level. The other is co-location of activities are well shown, well proven to be associated with more destinations means more incentive to get out there. That has positive effects on mental health, depression, reduced loneliness, increasing physical activity, reduced obesity, etc. So yeah,
it's a silver bullet. That's wonderful. Thank you, Chris. And hang on here because we're going to have some questions that I'm sure you can help us respond to. Turning to Paul Irving, going from Hong Kong to Los Angeles. Isn't this really cool how we can do this? Paul, a valued friend and colleague who was also, as was mentioned earlier, a member of the commission, National Academy Commission on Healthy Longevity. Paul, one of the things that you've been involved with in your leadership of the Milken Institute and in other activities has been volunteering. And I'd like to hear your thoughts a bit about how this is one of the ingredients as we think about designing built environments for the future, to try to facilitate what the values are with respect to that, what the evidence might be.
Sure, Jack. Well, first, let me just echo your applause of Victor for the initiative and to thank you for your good work, and congratulations to Chinmoy, who not only gave us the reasons why we should be paying attention to this, but gave us the incredibly compelling demographic reasons why we must. That's certainly true in the U.S. as well, where we have issues with infrastructure and access and equity, where we have less of 1% of our housing stock being wheelchair accessible. But yeah, Jack, I kind of want to talk about volunteering, and maybe if I can work on a little bit of an argument for intergenerational connection. So, so there have been a series of studies, and I think, you know, oftentimes the older involved in volunteering, particularly volunteering for younger people, that it's naturally good for the younger beneficiaries of the older adults volunteering work. But I think what is not as well understood is the incredibly powerful health benefits that volunteering provides for older adults. And let me just give you a couple examples because I made a couple notes. So I remember these things. Of course, Jack, one that you know very, very well, a study that was led by our friend and colleague Linda Freed when she was at Hopkins, is the Experience Corps. For those who don't know, Experience Corps is a large program of ARP in the United States, although I think that there's some interest in expanding it beyond the US. It is a program where older adults are placed in classrooms in various cities across America. And of course, it's been wonderful for the young people who get to experience the relationships with older people. But what is not as well known is that the older adults, the older volunteers have reported fewer depressive symptoms and functional limitations. There's evidence of increases in brain activity, executive function. These benefits are sustainable over a period of months and in some cases years, enhanced neuroplasticity, et cetera. And this is just one example of many. There's another program in the US that has been called in the past, it's changed a little bit, RSVP AmeriCorps, now it's AmeriCorps Seniors. And again, what a study of this program found is that a very substantial majority in the high 80% range reported stable or improving health after a year of service, reduced social isolation and loneliness, increased feelings of wellness. There's a similar program in Japan, Reprints, for those of you who know the Japanese program. By the way, Jack, I know that there was a question in the chat about this frankly outrageous series of comments by a Yale assistant professor who is Japanese about older adults. Maybe you'll talk about that, but paradoxically, the Japanese program,
Paul, just to interrupt you. We'll talk about this later, but it's so outrageous it requires it boils me.
It is outrageous.
I'm reminded of the essay by Jonathan Swift, where he wrote something called A Modest Proposal, where there was concern in Europe that the population was growing too fast and that it was going to outstrip the food supply. So he wrote a satirical essay about how the solution was to eat the children. And, this is in the same category.
The difference is, I suspect, Jonathan Swift was a novelist, and I suspect exercising some level of literary license. I think that this guy was actually serious, the Japanese and Yale scholar, and I think I posted on social media that both Japan and Yale can do better. And so, by the way, Jack, I know we're tight on time. Just to make the point, there are now multiple studies, many of them observational, but still important, in Canada, in the US, in the EU, and various other places, suggesting that two things. One, that intergenerational relationships are a powerful health benefit, health palliative, health enhancement for older adults, making the case for co-generation, co-living arrangements and co-working arrangements, and that volunteering is a powerful salve. And of course, I think, Jack, one time Linda said to me something like, and of course, like you, she's a geriatrician, when you go into your doctor's office for your annual checkup, your doctor, in addition to poking and prodding and asking you what you're eating and asking you how much you're exercising and how much you're sleeping, should say with notebook poised, so tell me about your volunteering this year. Right. And I think that's a really good case.
Yeah, I think it should be one of the vital signs. There's blood pressure, pulse, temperature, respiratory rate, and hours volunteering.
You got it.
Thank you. Before we go to the Q&A, I do want to hold you for one more second, Paul, because you said something to me the other day that I thought was really interesting, and that is that this whole concept of longevity friendly, which of course is embedded in that is intergenerational relations, is a significant step beyond what we had in some ways. And one of the ways is that we used to kind of deal with development of populations of older persons in what was referred to as a naturally occurring way.
Oh, yeah.
And we should do it differently. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So we talk in my world a lot about NORCs, naturally occurring retirement communities, places that have high concentrations of older adults, and often places where those older adults are interacting in various ways. But Jack, I think that the rate of demographic change, and Hong Kong is certainly a terrific example of this, as is Singapore and many other places around the world. We need more intentionality, more speed that's focused on these shifts. And by the way, I'm so glad that we have Chinmoy and Chris here, because I think, very honestly, as much as I love my friends who are geriatricians, I think what we really need is intense focus by urban planners, architects, builders, and others who really need to reimagine the future of their own jobs. So we talked about intentionally occurring retirement communities, and again, not so much retirement, intentionally occurring intergenerational communities. And of course, what we know is that if we design a community well, design a building well for an older adult, it's very likely to be designed well for a younger person as well. I often say that, a door that fits a millennial can't necessarily fit a wheelchair, but a door that fits a wheelchair can almost always fit a millennial. So we need a lot more attention to that. And again, I think to reach out beyond the traditional health infrastructure that I think tends to kind of dominate the conversation about age-friendly, longevity-friendly, et cetera, and really develop stronger relationships with this community of designers, builders, planners who need to, I think, move more quickly to address the realities of the demographic shift.
Thank you. Unfortunately, intentionally occurring intergenerational communities is not pronounceable. It's IOIC or something. It's not as easy off the lips as
if anybody in the audience has a good acronym, we're looking for it. That's
right.
Exactly.
I think we need a good acronym now. Turning to some questions that we may have from our colleagues who have joined us, or either Chris or Paul and myself. There was a comment in the chat about the assistant professor from Yale University. And thank God he's from Yale. I'm a Harvard guy, so I'm kind of good about that. Where he raised the question, I don't think he was advocating, and I don't want to overstate it, but he was raising the question about the mass suicide. Suicide is culturally more acceptable in Japan than has been, at least in the past, than in other countries. And it just underlines, I think it's actually good that he did this, because it just underlines the fact, which is emphasized and discussed very well in the Commission on Longevity, Healthy Longevity Report, about one of the principal primary problems we have is ageism. We just, unless we can crack the code on ageism, we're going to have difficulty in developing the policies and the programs that are needed to provide the appropriate supports and environment for the rapidly growing older population, and to extract the social capital and tremendous benefits that they bring. And this is not the time for a lecture about the positive aspects of an aging population, but I think it does. If there's anybody out there who is a denier of ageism, this event emphasizes the fact that we have to really keep vigilant about it. But that's not the topic for tonight. So I think we'll just move on to, if there are any other questions, great. I don't see any right now, so waiting for some. Chris, do you have any other thoughts based on what you've heard that you wanted to add at this point?
I can pick up on the intergenerational living.
Thank you.
As you know, there's experiments going on all over the world. Some more market-led, some more government-led. Berlin is well known for its adventurous bringing together of millennials and Gen Z and elders. Confucian societies out this way have a strong tradition in that. In fact, there are a lot of problems associated with intergenerational living in Hong Kong in terms of mental health and what have you, partly because of the density. But going back to my point about what we can change, what we can influence and what we can't, there is, we did a little bit of statistical analysis showing the effect that, or the association between meters squared of living space and propensity to live with an elder. And it's significant, and I think there are a few other studies showing similar things. So minimum housing standards. Hong Kong has recently had a public discussion about minimum humane housing space. A minimum standard can encourage intergenerational living for obvious reasons. More space, you consider it. Less space, you can't. I know that's probably implausible, difficult to sort of get your head around in the United States, where space would never be really a constraint if you really wanted your elderly parent to live with you. It really makes a difference out here.
Thank you.
So just one other adjunct thought. We mentioned in our warm-up discussion last week, I think, mainland China is a huge innovator, probably a market leader in innovative intergenerational living at quite a large scale. I know you have massive retirement communities, the famous one in Florida that everyone loves to hate, probably for good reasons. A lot of the Chinese experiments are much more nuanced in how they bring people different ages together. They shouldn't be written off as an aberration. They are possibly a solution to the demographic that part of the solution to the demographic that Chinmoy nicely put up in his graph.
Thank you, Chris.
Jack, if I can just weigh in really quickly, I would say, by the way, the one in Florida, which happens to have been the fastest growing metro in the United States, according to the 2020 census here, is very much not intergenerational. It is generational, and it's one of the arguments. Hey, Jack, if I can just mention one other thing, just think about on the ageism front really quickly. Paradoxically, while COVID risks obviously most significantly impacted older adults and those with comorbidities, there were a series of studies in the U.S. that found that older adults were actually more resilient, less emotionally affected by COVID. Probably understandable as a result of just have life experience and having been through tougher times. So it kind of makes, again, I'm fighting with the Japanese Yale academic. It kind of makes the case that there is an opportunity for older adults, even in very tough times, potentially to help young people who are struggling. And there are many, many young people who are struggling, certainly
Yeah.
I know the places I visit. So
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. I'm glad you mentioned that. The first of those studies regarding COVID and the lesser emotional lability in older persons was from Laura Carstensen and her colleagues at Stanford. There have been several other studies that have replicated that experience, and it's consistent with the long literature that as people get older, they're less emotionally labile, less fear, less anger.
Yeah.
That's just one of the many benefits. There was a question about metrics, and that is that Chinmoy mentioned the old age dependency ratio. That is, I think, in my own personal view, kind of an archaic measure of it's the number of people over 65 versus the number of people, over 15 or over 5 or whatever number you want to pick. And it's a static measure. It kind of looks backward, not forward, and doesn't say anything about functionality. It's just people are alive. So there have been some other metrics used. I would refer the person asking that question to the United Nations report that came out 2 weeks ago on aging in society, where they review these different metrics. One of the favorites that you'll see is called the prospective old age dependency ratio. What they do is they're saying, instead of targeting this to 65, let's pick a more reasonable age. And that is, for instance, right now, what is the age at which active life expectancy, active, not just being alive, but disability-free life expectancy is 20 years, okay? And that may be contingent on living to age 75 at this point. So if you do it that way, it would be the number of people over 75 in that population of interest divided by the denominator of everybody over 15. That is, you're looking more forward-looking, and you're looking more in active life expectancy, thinking about compression of morbidity or decompression rather than just being alive. So I would just leave that participant's question with the concept of referring them to the prospective old age dependency ratio. In ending, as we're at the end, I think it would be fitting and proper to turn to Chinmoy and see if there's anything that Chinmoy would like to add as a final comment to this.
Jack, you may not be able to.
Before we get to Chinmoy, that my boss, Victor, has the question. So we should go to Victor.
Yeah.
Hi, Victor.
Actually, Jack, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask Chinmoy to make the final remarks about exactly your question and how this experience has helped him, particularly in working in this area that's so important in Hong Kong. So Chinmoy,
you and I have been working together too long, Victor. Chinmoy, the final word.
Yeah, thank you very much, Victor, John. Well, I think I have written down some points as an offshoot of what we discussed today. And I'll begin by saying that we have to move from our quest of the ultimate Methuselah to bridging the gap between the health span and the lifespan, so as to reduce the burdens, the social, healthcare, and economic burdens on our societies. And as Jack pointed out, WHO's age-friendly cities, aging in place are all excellent initiatives to start with. However, a more holistic, nuanced, and preventive approach will be a life course approach to healthy longevity, which is necessary. The challenge, so we have a lot of challenges, but also opportunities, especially in how we optimize our cities, the density in our cities, the design of our neighborhoods, public spaces, as well as transport systems, in ways that it can promote and sustain healthy lifestyles, behaviors, as well as segregate, minimize, offset risk factors such as pollution, inequity, and so on. And this has to happen right from conception in utero up to late life. So that's the issue. And then initiating societal changes towards healthy longevity will also have to be collaborative. And we have to find a collaborative and ethical model of sharing knowledge, intellectual property, best practices, and importantly, the government's healthcare sector, academic institution, and private sectors can no longer afford to be the big elephants in the room, muted by siloed thinking. There has to be close coupling and collaboration. And this is the reason why we discussed about the pilot health district in Queenstown, which is again a partnership towards community-based innovations. That's quite important. At a neighborhood level, there is an opportunity for policymakers and planners to incentivize greater age integration and through co-housing, co-location of health promoting facilities, as Jack pointed out, to improve social support and access to health services. From a design perspective, assistive universal design can enable better person-environment fit and thereby compensate for the age-induced deficits that we experience in our functional capacities. And with respect to the city's system scale, from an urban scientist perspective, at a city level, the challenge is how do we define a health-optimized city size? Now, economy of scale implies that as populations increase, the socio-demographic processes and services also scale, and there's a marked regularity that is observed. And this is sort of explained by the mathematically by the scaling functions. So we need to identify what those functions are to guide the policymakers to optimize resource allocation in our cities as we aim towards healthy longevity. And behavior change is always challenging, more so for elderly and old age. And there has to be adequate support and training from our family members and society so as to adopt to the new changes. And for elderly or older population, it may involve adapting to newer technologies, newer means of social engagement that can promote greater ikigai, purposeful living, and provide the longevity dividends as explained in the NAM's report. And lastly, I wish to take the inspiration from the British epidemiologist Geoffrey Rowe's seminal work on prevention paradox. As a population level strategy, urban interventions for healthy living is likely to be long lasting, and it is likely to affect a significant proportion of population. So therefore, it has the potential to shift the population level distribution of risks and can be a population level prevention strategy. And of course, I am very grateful for the opportunity to work in the Healthy Longevity Project, and I wish to sort of take my experiences from this to contribute to the science of healthy longevity and longevity-ready cities. And indeed, very grateful.
Thank you. We look forward to your continued excellent contributions to this field. You're a fabulous colleague. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, Paul, Chris, the staff who made this work around the world, real time. And I think we're done. Thank you all very much.
So, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and I extend my sincere congratulations to Chinmoy on the completion of his fellowship. Thank you all for joining this evening. Thank you to our panelists, and I'll just mention for those of you that are still on the line that there are two other fellows in this program, Dr. Kai Chong and Dr. Holly Howe. Holly just finished her residency in Washington, D.C. All of the fellows in this program will be giving similar presentations, and we hope that many of you will be able to join for them. And travel permitted, I'll be looking forward to coming to Hong Kong and being together for some of these future presentations. Once again, thank you all for joining. And until then, have a good day or a good evening, wherever you may be.
Thank you, Chris, Greg, very much. And this is a fabulous program. Keep it going. Really worthwhile.
Thank you, Jack. And thanks for overcoming the technical issues. You get,
Yeah, well,
it's pretty amazing that with an iPhone, you can broadcast all over the world.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye. Thank you.